Rod Farva asking about Greg Madison stepping down. And so let's set everybody up with where we stand on the defensive side of the ball. And the coaching staff of Parker Fleming has been elevated to special teams coordinator. Matt Barnes moves over as secondary coach. And so I guess we'll start with you, Kevin, in regards to the defensive coaching staff. So number one question for me is the defensive staff is set, correct?
It's set, but we could see a defensive analyst or two maybe come in, and that was something that Ryan Day was asked about this morning. And it's something that he said that he certainly has been evaluating. And as I read between the lines, I absolutely expect a new defensive analyst to come in and kind of be a fresh set of eyes, not necessarily, he can't be one of those 10 on-field recruiting type of coaches or whatnot, but we've seen Alabama certainly run through its fair share of analysts, former head coaches and those types of guys. And I think that that's where we're going to be, but we're not necessarily, they're at 10. So, it's not going to be a case of where we're going to see anybody who's going to come in at this point and be one of these on-field type of coaches at this point. Kerry Combs now is no longer saddled with a position, so to speak. I still expect him to work with the corners a good amount, but he's going to be more in that Greg Madison rover type of position to where he can kind of work with all units on the defense with Matt Barnes listed as a secondary coach. But, I don't think you bring in somebody with Kerry Combs' record and not let him spend a good amount of time with the corners.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Kerry will still be spending a lot of time in one-on-ones down there, grading the corners on every rep and correcting mistakes. It seems to me like Barnes is going to be involved in overseeing all of the defensive backs. It sounds like Parker Fleming, who seems to be a very bright young kid. I say kid, that's probably not a bright young mind, I guess. Yeah, younger than me. I think they're all younger than me by this point, other than Combs, but and Larry Johnson, of course. But I think that I just had a weird feeling that Day's the first head coach they've had who's younger than me as well. But at any rate, I just think that Fleming is going to be involved in that secondary as well. And so Barnes will be kind of the one voice overall for that group. And I think it does allow Combs to work closer with Al Washington with the linebackers and Larry Johnson with the defensive line to kind of build that synergy of the whole thing as a whole. And I guess they're going to take that as it is. And my feeling, Kerry Combs has had 1 year, and I think he's on the clock. I think you get a second year to show that maybe the first year was not how it's going to be in a typical year going forward. And obviously, Coach Day pointed out they didn't have spring football. The preseason was messed up. They only played 6, 7, 8 games, whatever it was. The guys were banged up, COVID, people out with COVID, especially for the championship game. So there were a lot of variables involved to explain why it didn't operate at full strength. Really for much more than a game or two all season. But the message has been kind of sent that we got to get this fixed, and we got to get it fixed now because we can't abide this in the future, and we're not going to lose out on national championship opportunities because one of our units is substandard. So they've recruited at such a high level. Only thing I will say, I say they've recruited at such a high level, but you look at these classes, and most years, if they sign 24 guys, let's say, what we've usually seen is like 13, 14 of them are blue chippers on offense, and then 9 or 10 of them are okay to good blue chippers on defense. It's like it's become the offense has overshadowed the defense in terms of recruiting at times, it seems, at Ohio State, and they've got to start getting those national top 20 guys, top 50 guys on defense to come to Ohio State. And they've had them, obviously. They've had them in the past with the Bosa brothers and so on and so forth. It's just, maybe the talent level is not necessarily up where it has been in years past on that side of the ball, or the numbers or whatever. But maybe I'm picking nits on that. But when you become known as an offensive first program, as they have the last 3 years, that's kind of where things sometimes skew a little bit when your head coach is so focused, so laser focused on got to get me, the shiniest, neatest wide receivers, and they take 4 of them a year, which, seems a little bit overkill at times. What's left for them to fill spots on the defensive side. But that's a minor complaint, I think, in this whole thing. Just something that's kind of been in the back of my head for a while. But otherwise, I do think Kerry Combs is going to do a fine job this year. I think it's going to work out just fine. It's just getting from point A to point B is going to be the journey for them.
But if you sit there and you look at this class, I think that they are going to have the opportunity to have a couple of their highest rated recruits will be on the defensive side. Obviously, you already have Jack Sawyer, who signed and on campus. Rivals had him as a 5-star top 20 type player. You have Ja'Kalen Johnson or J.K. Johnson, the defensive back out of St. Louis. Rivals had him as a 6.0 Rivals rating, which means generally like a top 50 type of guy. And then, of course, we've already kind of talked about that guy out in Washington State. And if they're able to bring him in, that's going to be a big deal as well. That's going to give them another top 10 type of player on the defensive line. But maybe they just haven't necessarily had the depth in terms of these can't-miss blue chippers coming right out of high school. Obviously I did mention J.K. Johnson. I think you look at guys like Jordan Hancock and Denzel Burke, and they're they may be criminally underrated, at least on Rivals. I think they might be a little lower than they should be. My ranking, so I can say that on them. But I do agree that maybe they haven't necessarily had maybe some of the depth in terms of these top-end guys on defense, because Ohio State's identity over the last couple of years, especially under Ryan Day, has been an offensive one. And when you have, you look at future classes, you look at Quinn Ewers, who's the number 1 overall player in the country, a quarterback out of South Lake Carroll, Texas. You already have him. You've already got him surrounded with, more offensive talent in that class. Ohio State's certainly trending well with some 23 quarterbacks right now. So, it's certainly not anything I would have ever expected to see if I were to go back to my undergraduate years from 89 to 94, 5. I took the slow route through college. I never would have seen Ohio State being some sort of offensive juggernaut, and yet here we are.
Dave really, really likes Barnes. I spoke highly of him when he hired him about his experience at Maryland and stepping in a difficult situation when DJ Durkin left and took a leadership role of the Maryland defense. And so has experience not just in the secondary, but linebacker as well in his career. But, we'll see how it goes. I know Day he said he's a big fan of internal hires. Him being an internal hire, you can understand that. The Parker Fleming thing, he's a QC guy that was running much of special teams over the last 3 years. So I think that's just a natural fit. And then this frees up Matt Barnes to help out defensively more and puts more focus on the secondary, which I think we can all agree was an issue last year. And so you've got Kerry Combs. I know Steve mentioned this possibility a week or two ago that maybe Kerry Combs just doesn't have a position to coach. And I'm like, well, that's crazy. Kerry Combs himself would go crazy with no set position to coach. But as Dave put it, he may grab the linebackers one day, he may grab the corners another day, he may grab the nickels another day. I think he's going to remain busy. But, again, I'm okay with this. I won't die on this hill after 4 weeks of bad defense next year. I just think you can't get super upset about the way the defense was in a pandemic. And no, it's not a splash hire by just bringing in Parker Fleming and then moving Matt Barnes over. But I don't think the defense is as bad as it was this year because of, terrible coaching, terrible players. I think things are going to be much better in 2021. We'll see. We'll get a much better readout on who should be fired, who should be cut, who should be, promoted in 2021. And I don't want to put too much stock in how things went in 2020. But again, if there are no improvements in 2021, then boom, you got to go.